guys, welcome to a special episode of the Indie Heads podcast, or rather the start of a little series we are going to be doing on Phil Elverum's discography. I'm Alex, and with me on this journey...
I'm Jake.
Yeah, today we're going to be talking about the Microphones early demos from 1996 to 1998, and Don't Wake Me Up.
Yeah.
First proper album.
Yeah, so basically I feel like how this series is going to mostly work is each episode will probably be a mixture of like an actual full-length Microphones/Mount Eerie album, and then since he just has like dozens of little mini albums and kind of like side projects and stuff, those will kind of be tossed on the pile as well. But like Alex just said, today we're specifically doing the early tapes, which is a compilation album that was actually released in 2016, but it's kind of pulls various songs from the dozens of early Microphones tapes. So I feel like that was a sort of easier decision to make than having to do like 6 separate episodes on like the Microphones early demos.
Oh man, that would have been a lot.
Yeah, I mean, like realistically, this could be a 150 episode series, but we are gonna try to avoid that. Try to keep it below 100 at least. So yeah, I guess I don't know what's a good way to start this. Like, this is the very first episode, so it's kind of like, how did you first encounter Mr. Phil Elverum?
Well, the very first time I listened, I was a senior in high school, and I listened to the Glow Part 2 on YouTube, or I started and got like midway through the title track and turned it off, not because I didn't like it, but because I was in a really bad place and it was not helping.
Yeah.
What about you, Jake? What was your introduction?
Honestly, I could probably say what you just said verbatim, because I think I was also a senior in high school, and I think I also listened to like the Glow Part 2 on YouTube or something like that. And then I don't really remember, because I don't think it clicked for me right away either. I think I just kind of slowly started listening to the Glow Part 2 specifically, like more and more until my freshman year of college. And then at some point I was like, hey, this is the greatest album of all time. And then I don't know, it kind of went from there. There's so much Microphones and Mount Eerie content out there that I still feel like I haven't fully grasped all of it, even to this point where I've been a huge fan for the last like 6 years or whatever. But
yeah, there's a lot to dig in, which is kind of nice. It's kind of nice to have like an endless discography a little bit.
But it really is, yeah, because he's at this point he's pretty firmly one of my favorite artists of all time. So it's nice to be like, oh, there's like one of my favorite artists of all time has like this album that I've only heard 4 times, or whatever, like some deep cut compilation. There's just endless stream of music to get into.
Yeah, and I don't know, I picked him back up summer of 2017. And got fully into the Glow Part 2.
Yeah,
and since then he's become like one of my biggest artistic influences, not necessarily in like style or what we do, but just like I really kind of respect and admire the way he approaches his work and approaches like having an artistic career.
So I mean, I don't know, I guess just to start, since this is again not the Glow Part 2 episode, we'll have plenty more to say on that when that time comes, but I guess I'll just give like a little brief history of Phil Elverum, which is mostly just like plagiarized from Wikipedia. But the gist of it is Phil, like in his hometown of Anacortes, Washington, used to work at a record store where he made just a bunch of demo tapes with the recording equipment that was available in the back of the store. And he released a couple demo tapes that way, and then at some point he moved to Olympia, Washington, and got involved with Kelvin Johnson and K Records,
Yeah.
which is again like a record label based out of Olympia, Washington, sort of like a counter record label to the stuff that was going on in like Seattle in the 90s apparently. But actually, according to the like list I found on Wikipedia, there's some pretty well-known artists on K Records. I thought it was like a sort of a smaller label, but you have like Modest Mouse is on K Records and Built to Spill.
Yeah,
Like
a lot of
Beck apparently.
a lot of really like essential acts from the Pacific Northwest at the time like had some kind of contact or relation to K Records.
Yeah, yeah, and I think at some point he toured with an artist named Mira, who appears on. She's like sort of a staple collaborator with Phil. I think she's on every one of the Microphones albums in like some capacity, or at least like the four like canonical Microphones albums or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of. I mean, you know, I guess it's a pretty quick and vague introduction, but there's not a ton of information out there on like the really early microphone stuff, as it is pretty far into the underground.
Yeah.
But one thing that I wanted to know kind of about the early microphone stuff is that I guess it's like goal to me seems less about like making songs and making like coherent albums, and they feel a lot more like production experiments and like sound collages and stuff like that.
Yeah. And he was writing these songs about the equipment he was recording them on.
Yep, yeah, exactly. You have songs that are like about microphones or like about compressors and feedback. Actually, I found a quote from Phil in some interview where he's talking. I'm just going to read the quote. He's like,
Sure.
the early songs were literally about recording, about gear, sort of in a metaphorical way, like my heart is the preamp or whatever. You know, I was in high school, so lay off, man. So yeah, that's kind of, I feel like, how you could characterize a lot of those early demo tapes, which admittedly, I don't even think I've listened to all of them. Some of them are really not that accessible and hard to find. I mean, there's so many, just like a really quick rundown of some of the names. You got like Face Shapes, microphone mix, wires and chords, Tests. There's actually like 3 albums named Tests for some reason. Jimmy Sharp, Man of Mystery is like a
oh my
bootleg album. Yeah.
That's
So
really something.
imagine if Phil to this day went under the moniker Jimmy Sharp, Man of Mystery. I feel like he would be playing Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
You know?
These demos are just like ideas.
Yeah.
It's just like
I mean, that's a pretty
scattershot ideas that he threw at a wall, and you can very much tell that like they were made and recorded by someone who was learning how to play the instruments he was, writing them with, and also learning to use the equipment. And there's a scrappiness to that that's appealing. That's kind of like interesting to listen to.
No, absolutely. As a matter of fact, this is like, I think, a pretty good segue into just talking about the early tapes themselves, like the actual early tapes album.
Yeah.
Which again, this compilation was released in 2016, and it's a compilation of some of the songs from those various albums that I just listed. And yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said. They're just, a lot of them aren't necessarily really songs. They do feel sort of like sound collage-y. There's not like any sort of cohesion. They kind of just like stumble into one another. But again, this is like a compilation, so obviously you can't really, expect it to flow in any sort of way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I listened to this, like the actual compilation. I'd heard some of these songs before, but I listened to the actual compilation for the first time, I think like a couple weeks ago. There's some like weird shit on here.
About same. Yeah. Okay. So when we first started talking about doing this, I sent you some messages that you never saw because I deleted them because I was saving it.
Okay.
This podcast, and it was about Teenage Mustache.
Yeah.
Basically, my thought what it sounds like to me is like the song that manifests in Alex G's worst nightmares.
I
That
can,
he
yeah.
like attempts to recreate in his music to purge it from his brain, but it
Yeah,
there's
I
just
think that's a pretty succinct way.
yeah.
So Teenage Mustache is one of the songs that is on Jimmy Sharp Men of Mystery. So maybe it's like a sort of alter ego kind of thing, but I don't even know if Phil is singing on it. It's sort of a deeper
I
voice.
in like the latter half of the song, you can tell that he's involved, but I do not know who's singing the deeper voiced parts.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of different voices that show up on the compilation, and I actually compared it to a Ween song.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I definitely see that.
that I think it's interesting that he made that the first track, because it's definitely the, I think, most like abrasive song here.
Yeah.
Not necessarily abrasive, but it's just like kind of really out of left field, and I'm like, this doesn't really sound like the Microphones.
Yeah, it is by far the least Phil sounding thing
Yeah,
that I have
yeah,
heard from him.
exactly. But as you get more into the album, I think there's, I don't know, like 20 songs on here or something like that, maybe less, but um there are definitely some kind of moments of Phil Elverum. Like, I don't know how to describe this. Like, you can hear the later microphone stuff show up in certain places on some of the songs. Um,
Yeah.
like, I'm trying to think of some of them
Compressor
that I
is
like.
really lovely. Oh, one track that stuck out to me was drum tape loop with bass. No, sorry. Um, wires and chords.
Yep, that's,
Yeah.
I think, I was going to say the same thing. I think Wires and Chords is for sure the standout track on this to
Yeah.
me. And I think I made a little list of what each track, like where each track comes from. And Wires and Chords comes from the album Wires and Chords. And it's I think it's the most albumy album that gets like pulled from.
Yeah.
I think it's like maybe one of the later songs
Yeah.
that gets put on here, and you can definitely tell it's like a legitimately interesting song as
Yeah,
opposed to
like
some of the.
it goes kind of intriguing places, and it really like takes you from a journey. Like where you end
Yeah,
up at the end is very different from where you started.
yeah, and it's like it's kind of, I think I said that it reminds me of Someone Great by LCD Sound System, which might be sort of a stretch, but it's got these like skippy, glitchy little like drum machine loops that are cool.
No,
And
I kind of get it. I kind of get
yeah,
what you mean.
and it's fun though, because it's sort of like you can hear the transition from this type of songwriting where he's literally sort of talking about recording equipment and stuff, because the song's called Wires and Chords, and it's like about literal wires and chords. Um, but I don't know, it's also like a love song about like sharing tapes back and forth with someone.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. And it's kind of mixes together the sort of like DIY production experiment collage with actual songwriting, which is something that I think he will kind of slowly start to transition into more and more,
Yeah.
like as his discography goes on. But yeah, that was definitely a standout track for me. When I was taking notes on this album, there's so many songs that are just like bass. It's a bass instrumental, or like drum tape loop with bass. Like, guess what? It's a drum tape loop with a bass
Yeah.
on it. Or like feedback loop. Like, oh, it's a feedback loop. It's like kind of just like he's not really naming the songs. He's just naming them like what they sound like.
He would kind of continue to do that for the rest of his career, like all the
Yeah.
different somethings and
Yep. Yeah, or like even on like It Was Hot, We Stayed in the Water, which we'll get to shortly as well, but I think that song or that album has like a song called Drums on it, and it's
Yeah.
drums. So definitely kind of blurs those lines between songwriting and just experimentation with like recording equipment, like
Phil
in a
has
very literal
always sort
sense.
of been like very forward about what he's doing in
Yeah.
that way. And even like this translates to like him on Twitter, like he's coming out with a new album and he's gonna announce it, and he starts the tweet by saying, advertisement.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Or like if you go to the video for Love Without Possession, it literally starts with, Lost Wisdom Part 2 coming out was it November 8th, I think. Um and literally it says advertisement.
Right, yeah.
And it's like the music video for your song. I don't know. I've always really appreciated that, and it's also just kind of funny sometimes.
Yeah. And it is interesting. I feel like with most artists, you don't really have this level of access to like the earliest, most formative demos they were making.
yeah.
Like most people don't ever really release that kind of stuff. So you can really truly see like Phil starting to make music for the first time, transition into him being like a fully fledged professional recording artist kind of in real time. So it's just I don't know. There's all sorts of interesting things. And this isn't really an album that I would probably ever toss on and listen to in full if it's, unless I'm like doing a podcast about it. But there's all sorts of, like interesting ideas on it. I would say for sure. there's a lot of cool moments that you can see he kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like dials in on and
took a first step.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Compressor is really lovely.
Yep. Yeah.
There's something just kind of sweet about it, and it's very like gentle and tender, and he's just singing about how he wished he could, use it better.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And I wrote that same thing. Like it's a song called Compressor about how he wishes he knew how to use a compressor. And then I was like, what is a compressor? Like, what does a compressor do? I'm like actually kind of curious. I looked it up and it says that it has something to do with evening out the dynamic range of a song. So I guess it like takes out the high and low frequencies or something. But I don't know. This is funny. Or like, Microphone Part 2, which is a song. It's like in French, which is cute. But then it's just like about microphones. So I don't know. There was another song actually that I wrote down that's not on this compilation. It's on the album Tests, which many of the songs on the compilation are also on that album. But I wanted to listen to that one too, and it was sort of the same thing. But there's a song on it called "Oh Anna" that I like really, really liked, and so I feel like I should just give it a shout out in this episode.
Yeah. Sure.
But yeah, it's just kind of like a cool little ode to Anna Cordes. That's why it's called "Oh Anna," and Phil doesn't sing on it. Apparently, it's sung by Kayla Marisic. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but she's also like a frequent collaborator with Phil, and she was on a lot of the early microphone stuff too. But it's got that kind of like classic soft, loud, soft thing with the haunting little melody, and I don't know. And that's something that obviously he will go on to do even to this day, which is just really, really loud noises and really, really soft vocal performances.
Yeah. When we're gonna get to Wynn's poem eventually, but I haven't listened to it too many times. I'll obviously be getting more familiar with it for our pod later. But one thing I've always appreciated about it was just how he's doing black metal, but he's still singing like Phil Elverum.
And there's like no in between either. It's like he's either making this really sparse and like delicate and sad folk music, or he's just like got completely overblown, distorted everything. There's not like any in between.
One of the genuinely like kind of most interesting and like best sonic parts of the Glow Part 2 is how the drums clip.
Yeah, right. Like that, and that's intentional. Like it's supposed to sound overblown
he made
like
it
that.
Part of the song, and it's like emotive and kind of beautiful in a way.
Yeah, and it's like because you can only make drums sound so loud before. Like I feel like making them clip on purpose just makes it sound really loud.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, do you have any other really concrete thoughts about the early tapes in particular?
Well, when I was listening to them, I kind of, it made me think about and I don't remember where I heard this. I feel like maybe I got it while reading Dawn or something, but I remember like seeing early microphone shows referred to as like kind of crazy, almost tribalistic events where he would
Interesting.
perform like mostly unreleased embryonic material. And I imagined that the experience of listening to these demos must have felt similar to attending one
Yeah.
of those shows.
I've seen a few videos on YouTube that are like full-length concert uploads from, the microphones circa
Yeah.
2002, 2003, and pretty much every time it's like just Phil and like his guitar, and he's got like a couple amps, and then everyone else is just like sitting on the ground, like crisscross applesauce, and he's just kind of like playing these songs, the little like monologues in between them.
Yeah.
And yeah, it does seem like a really kind of like intimate concert experience.
Yeah. It was I watched one that actually you had you'd done the set list for.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Where he I can't remember what song it was. I don't think it was one that ever got like properly released, but he had
Right.
the entire audience singing with him.
Yeah.
Just as background.
Yep, and it wasn't even like, hey, if you know it, sing along. He's like, here's what you are gonna sing for this song.
Yeah.
Sing it when I tell you to. So yeah, I feel like that's a pretty succinct kind of overview of the early tape stuff.
Move on to Don't Wake Me Up.
Yeah, so Don't Wake Me Up, this is the first, I guess, real Microphones album. I don't know, it's kind of a blurry distinction between what is the first album, but I think by most accounts this is like the first proper Microphones LP released on an actual label. And yeah, Don't Wake Me Up came out in 1999. Apparently it just came out under Microphones instead of The Microphones. So I think he kind of went through a few variations of that. Actually,
well, I mean, in Apple Music, all his music is under Microphones.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah, so...
But then, on the cover of the Glow Part 2, it says, by the Microphones.
Right, yeah. That's weird. Yeah, I think he just kind of, like, changes it around. Microphones, the Microphones. He released an album called The Microphones under the name Phil Elverum, so... I mean, he's changed his name a bunch of times, but...
Classic Phil.
Right. But yeah, so this is the first Microphones album, and it does actually sound like an album, unlike the early tapes, which definitely felt like just a random compilation of, like, sonic experimentation. But this is definitely an album. It doesn't necessarily, like, flow super well. It does still sound sort of like a group of sounds and textures that kind of like run into one another, but definitely a lot sharper songwriting, or more like distinctly, like you can say that it is songwriting,
Also, a lot of his kind of like in your document you called them tropes, so we'll use that word.
Yeah.
A lot of his, like, I don't know, like Phil standard sounds, or like kind of ideas he was going to be reusing for the rest of the Microphones tenure, like kind of first appear here.
Absolutely.
And that was the first thing I noticed about this record, was how, like, stylistically similar it was to It Was Hot and the Glow Part 2, and how in many ways they're all kind of sonically the same album. It's just each is like the next level.
Yep. Yeah. I feel that exact same way. I feel like each one kind of... Mount Eerie, the album, is sort of a departure, but I feel like this album, It Was Hot, We Stayed in Water, and the Glow Part 2 do kind of fall under some sort of like cohesive unit. I mean, I guess just some of the like distinguishing traits of these albums are, like, obviously it's very lo-fi, which is sort of a, it's not like an intentional thing. Like, he's not going out of his way to like try to muddy it up. It's like, this is the sounds that he has available to him based on like the recording equipment he has, being just some kid in the 90s.
I was actually appreciating that a lot when I was listening to it. Like, this album, in some ways, and this feels like saying a lot, but in some ways feels a little more atmospherically focused than a lot of his other work. Like the song Here with Summer, like the entire point of that is generating atmosphere, and the rhythm and melody are kind of insignificant, and I don't know, I guess I feel like that pops up all over the album kind of in regards to this being lo-fi. Like there's just so much more atmosphere in lo-fi music than something that's like cleanly recorded, which I don't think is like bad or anything, but I don't know. I think there's something to be said uh for, doing what you can with what you have.
Yeah, exactly. I was literally going to say that almost verbatim. Like he really works with what he's got on this album. Like the way that he's just able to like harness these huge sounding like instrumentals and stuff is just kind of crazy given, what he probably had to work with, because some of these songs just sound like hugely epic, like on purpose. He just makes them like so loud and like punishing. But then he'll always like contrast it with his like soft, like very like boyish vocals, and I don't know, it's kind of like his voice is like a guiding light through the just like chaos of some of these songs. Like he's like calling out to you in like a thunderstorm or something like that. Another thing is that like as far as the lyrics go, like there is not really a lot of lyrical cohesion that I was really able to pick up on. They're kind of like vague and metaphorical, but there's definitely some very like staple Phil themes going on. Like he talks a lot about like the ocean and the sky and like being cold. And even though it's not like as emotionally precise as like some of his later stuff will get, it does do like a really good job of kind of rendering the whole Pacific Northwest aesthetic into sound. I think, like, I've never been to the Pacific Northwest, but it just kind of evokes a very like dreary and rainy and overcast like texture. I don't know.
You're right about that. I go there often, and it feels like that there in some ways.
Yeah, exactly. Like I feel like I don't even need to go there. I can just be like, oh, that's what it is like over there.
Yeah, I've been just like sonically.
Right, exactly. So, what are your favorite songs on Don't Wake Me Up?
I really liked Ocean 123.
Mm-hmm.
I love the vocal tone and the classic and I really liked Here with Summer too.
I'll talk about Here with Summer, because Here with Summer is maybe my favorite song on here, which is kind of weird because it's like an instrumental song. He doesn't even sing on it, but I don't know why. I just really love the atmosphere. It's like, again, completely instrumental, but there's this really beautiful like organ synth, or I don't even know what it is. It's like really creepy, and it kind of like swells in and out, and there's like these distorted electric guitars like in the background. There's like an accordion in it. It's just like a really weird kind of mixture of different textures.
It's kind of very soothing though.
Yeah.
Also, and like cozy.
It is.
And I haven't heard this album many times, but I can picture that song perfectly in my head.
I agree with Ocean 123. I think it's kind of funny that I think every one of the first three Microphones albums, the first song kind of does something similar, where it starts off really like soft, you get like a xylophone, and then at some point it just punches into the next gear of like distortion. Which is like obviously something that he continues to do, but it's just interesting. Like Ocean 123 does it, and like The Pull does it, and then also I Want Wind to Blow does it. So I don't know. I think that's kind of an interesting way to tie them all together as well.
And going back to what we were talking about earlier a little bit, like I think he just kind of like had these general ideas and was just fleshing them out more and more as he was becoming a more skilled songwriter, until he had like actually like really put them out there and in the way they should be, I guess, and then moved on.
Exactly.
There's a lot amazing thinking about how he went from like The Glow Part 2 to Dawn. Like the songs from Dawn were the next thing he wrote.
I mean, because when you think about it, I feel like these songs almost, they don't put like any emphasis on the songwriting. It's like all emphasis on texture and atmosphere. And then when you get to Dawn, it's like there is none of that. It's just the songwriting. So it is kind of interesting to watch that transition sort of happen.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's all sorts of stuff on Don't Wake Me Up that I heard and I was like, oh yeah, like that's something he does all the time, or that's something he does all the time, where it's like this is the first place he did it. Like I just love like specifically his voice, and then Mira, who also sings on this album a lot. They just have like the two most like beautiful, angelic, soft vocals, and like every time they're together, the background is just like a wall of noise. And it's just like, I don't know. I think it's like such a cool contrast because they could really easily just like, play some soft, plucky acoustic guitars and it'd be like a fun little indie album. But he's like, nah, let's take our beautiful voices and just like completely smother them.
Something I always notice with their tracks too is their voices kind of clash in a strange way. Like, even though they feel like they're from the same dimension, they just like tonally hit these very different places, I guess.
Yeah. They don't blend together. I know what you're saying. Like you can when they're singing together, you can distinctly hear both of their voices. Like you can distinguish them really easily.
And it only adds to like the discord of the track itself.
Yep. There's also like a bunch of lyrical motifs and even like melodies that come back later, like I'll Be in the Air, like that melody, like note for note shows up again on the Glow Part 2.
Yeah.
Or they'll get like I'm Getting Cold as opposed to I Want to Be Cold, and they both songs kind of function in a really similar way. I'm trying to think of like what other ones. Or like I Felt You is another one.
Yeah. These songs were not these songs. These albums were kind of supposed to be like of a piece too. I remember he said somewhere that like they were each kind of like focused around a certain like element of nature.
Yeah.
Like this one was wind, and It Was Hot was, water, and then the Glow Part 2 was fire.
Interesting.
And Mount Eerie was earth.
That's a really interesting way to think about that. I've never even. Yeah, that does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. It kind of I appreciate that, like, I don't know. I feel like with something else, maybe knowing that would be like, oh, that feels kind of goofy, but they aren't like central to the albums.
No.
They're just the albums are just sort of marked by it, and it's kind of like there with them. So it doesn't feel like a forced concept or anything. It's just how it was.
Yeah, and especially since just nature in general, themes of nature. He lives in I'm assuming a pretty natural place with like mountains and rivers and the ocean and everything. It's just kind of like probably a part of his daily life that just is easy to like draw content for songs out of.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. What else we got on here?
Yeah, I don't know. I just I like the atmosphere all over it, and like it just wouldn't be like that if it was clean.
Right. Also Nylon Strings Baby. That's just like a really surefire way to get me to enjoy your music. Got to use those nylon strings. Yeah, get those steel strings out of here, man.
I love the swirling outro that ends the record.
Yeah.
Like it feels like the album just sort of compresses and wisps away.
Right, yeah. Or like also in that song, and this is another sort of characteristic of a lot of Phil's music, and it's like background noise. Like I feel like you can a lot of places on the song it feels like you're listening like he's recording it like outside, like next to a highway overpass or something, or like it sounds like it's raining on one song.
Yeah.
I don't know, it just really kind of gives it it kind of like lets the atmosphere
it really
envelop
feels like
you in a way.
Document of a time and place as much
as
a piece of art or a piece of music. Yeah, it's nice in that way.
And another cool thing that I just forgot that I wrote down, but I'm now reading it, is that he does this a couple times too. Is he'll be talking about like some sort of natural like weather phenomenon, like specifically the last song "I Felt You," where he's like the last line is "I felt you blow cool and soft across my face," and then there's like these really loud like vocals that come out, like it's almost like the vocals are supposed to be the wind he's talking about.
Yeah.
Or he does it on which we'll talk about this on the next episode, but like on that song "The Glow," he like the vocals are supposed to sound like sunlight. I don't know. It's just like a cool kind of idea where he tries to take these natural things and find their like sonic equivalent.
Yeah, yeah, he's got a really strong grasp of like taking these sounds and manipulating them into like communicating exactly what he's doing with his words and vocals. Mm-hmm. That gets stronger as he grows as an artist, and like obviously like the Glow Part 2 and like Sauna are both really peak on that.
Yeah, there's just like a lot of just really specific character to those albums that it doesn't really sound like anyone else. Like you hear that sort of thing and it's like it sounds like a Mount Eerie song.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else you want to touch on?
I don't know. Not really. Good shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of a perfect little opener to
his
discography. Because as much as it's like, not perfect, it really does like introduce you to all these concepts and kind of ways of thinking and stuff.
Yeah. It's maybe not, I don't listen to it a ton in comparison with other Phil Elverum projects, but I pretty much agree. It is a really good introduction to his discography in general. You can hear like, I don't know, it's cool to hear the origins of some of his really like defining ideas that he'll go on to expand.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
How long have we been going? What's the time?
Only like 30 minutes, I think.
That maybe that's good.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is, because we don't want this to be like too much time.
No, I don't think so. I think this is a very palatable length for a discussion on like 1.5 albums. Yeah. Cool. Well, I guess in that case, next week, what is the next one that we're doing?
Just It Was Hot, We Stayed in the Water.
It Was Hot, We Stayed in the Water.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I'm really excited to talk about.
That's gonna be a good one. That was one of the.
That album's only been growing on me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the one I got into right after the Glow Part 2, and it was just the kind of the perfect way to kind of follow up on his discography after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be a good one to talk about, and I think we can make that one into like a 30-minute conversation by itself.
Yeah.
Easily. And then, because a lot of our episodes are going to be like we're trying to talk about 5 things at once. So all right.
Yeah.
All right, then I guess thank you everybody for listening.
Yeah, thank you for listening. And we'll see you next week.
Godspeed.
Try to record every Monday.
Yes. I think we can do it.
Yeah, me too. It's not, I don't know, it's not too daunting.
Yeah, we'll play it by ear. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Bye.